CRPG company Owlcat Games recently announced that they've obtained the rights to create a Rogue Trader CRPG. Rogue Trader being a fairly popular pen and paper RPG that was based upon the Warhammer 40,000 role-playing system, mostly written by Fantasy Flight Games. Okay, this video is kind of a departure for this channel. I don't usually cover CRPGs. I'm more of a tabletop role-playing games kind of guy, but I do have to make an exception here. Because this game has gotten some coverage around the internet and on YouTube, but it's not up to the standards that I think it should. And it's for a very specific reason. I think there's very few people who actually can provide good coverage on this game, because it kind of fills out this, like, you need to be at the center of a very specific Venn diagram. Look, you need to be familiar with Owlcat Games, you need to be a Rogue Trader or Warhammer 40,000 veteran, and you also need to have a YouTube channel. And it may very well be possible that I am one of the only people who fits into the middle of that very specific Venn diagram. So that kind of confirms what I knew from the beginning. This is my game. It was made for me. And I think that means I have an obligation to speak up and to talk about Rogue Trader a little bit, and tell you what I think we can expect from the game.
By the way, this video is brought to you by the patrons. You'll hear more about them at the end.
Owlcat Games has, up till now, been known as the maker of the Pathfinder CRPGs, which are based on Pathfinder 1st Edition, and are adaptations of the campaign modules Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous. Kingmaker was a hair divisive when it was released, since it was very buggy, but it became quite polished over time. Wrath of the Righteous released in a much better state, and I honestly love it to death. When Owlcat started teasing an upcoming space-themed game, everyone assumed, myself included, that they had started to make a game about Starfinder, which is Pathfinder's sci-fi counterpart. We were all actually pretty shocked when it turned out to be Rogue Trader instead. This is a big shift for the company, and honestly, I am ridiculously excited. So, what's Rogue Trader? Rogue Trader was the second game released based on the Warhammer 40,000 roleplay system. The first was Dark Heresy, made in 2008 by Black Industries, which closed that same year. This allowed for Fantasy Flight Games to create the rest of the games in the series. Rogue Trader released the following year, and is one of the more beloved entries in the series. Now, I must remind you that my experience is mostly with Dark Heresy 2nd Edition, but there's a lot of overlap, so I can still tell you a lot about this thing. Rogue Trader is a bit of an odd man out when it comes to Warhammer 40,000 settings. Whereas every other corner of the universe is about the never-ending wars between the dystopian Imperium of Man and the other spacefaring empires and monsters of the warp, Rogue Traders are the only ones in the galaxy who have a free pass, called a Writ of Trade, from the Imperium to go and explore space, hang out with aliens, and do everything in their power to exploit every source of wealth they can find to drag back to the Imperium for fun and profit. What's more, these writs of trade are heritable, and the trailer suggests that you are part of a Rogue Trader dynasty, or if not, that you get declared to be the heir of a Rogue Trader. Point is, you're like a grimdark pirate noble. It's great. Alright, the story. What do we know, and what can we theorize? What is confirmed is that the Rogue Trader CRPG will be using the Coronis Expanse setting from the tabletop game, which is a rich and well-developed area, expanded out and iterated upon in over a dozen books. Rogue Trader lore is not my area of expertise, but I'll give you a quick overview. If you're unfamiliar with Warhammer 40k, then you should know that the big limiting factor in space is the warp. For humanity, space travel is also interdimensional travel. To get anywhere quickly, you have to jump through the warp, which is basically hell. As you can imagine, this kinda sucks, and it's got some downsides. One of the biggest is that the warp is pretty uneven and prone to warp storms breaking out and spilling out into real space. Basically meaning that there are big chunks of space that are inaccessible because they are full of madness and demons and stuff. With storms often lasting centuries, This means that there is an ever-shifting map of accessible and stable warp routes across the galaxy. In recent years, one such stable warp route has been discovered beyond Port Wander, allowing rogue traders and colonists to explore and exploit the partially explored Coronis expanse. Already, we can make a few calls from this. You will almost assuredly begin the game in Port Wander, and I suspect the map exploration system from the Pathfinder CRPGs is gonna make a return here, as your ship explores the stable routes in the expanse. I'm quite certain that we won't see many Owlcat original planets in this game, considering the pen and paper version has literally dozens of planets worth of game lore for Owlcat to work with. Now, the big speculative story question is this: will Owlcat be adapting the Warp Storm Trilogy campaign modules? Or will they be writing a wholly original storyline? Now, in many ways, the Warp Storm Trilogy is a natural fit for the CRPG. Owlcat has always adapted pre-written modules instead of writing original stories, which isn't a bad thing by any means. The trilogy outlines a major threat to the continued existence of the Expanse and the new colonies. In terms of stakes, this is great. However, the Warpstorm trilogy doesn't necessarily deliver on the premise of being an explorer of the sector. The entire first third of the campaign takes place on one planet as you defend a colony from an invasion of space orcs. However, here's the thing about Owlcat. They make ridiculously long games. I am a huge Owlcat simp, and I have never managed to complete either one of their CRPGs. For me, they are functionally infinite. So while the Warpstorm trilogy is only a three-parter that isn't all that big on exploration, I suspect that Owlcat will likely use the module and do some heavy rewriting. Probably weaving in other Rogue Trader adventure modules and hooks between parts of the trilogy, or coming up with original adventures to expand the three-parter into a 6-chapter-long game, like Kingmaker or Wrath of the Righteous. However, we're probably going to see a couple of these published adventures kept on standby, probably to be released as DLC at a later date. I foresee Owlcat's writing to actually improve considerably in this setting. In my opinion, the Owlcat team has always done a really great job at writing their stories. They have a sort of choose-your-own-adventure storybook mode that comes out at certain segments, and I'm relatively certain we're gonna see a return here. And it's very welcome. Where I see the improvement coming in is that Owlcat always kinda felt like they were stumbling a little over the 3-step alignment system with "I don't like you, die" evil option moments being ridiculed by the community. Well, Rogue Trader doesn't have that. So honestly, the biggest thing hamstringing Owlcat's writing will be gone, and this bodes very well for Rogue Trader. It is possible that they actually will introduce a different alignment system, more along the idea of Puritanism and radicalism, which is sort of a big theme in Dark Heresy, but we don't know for sure. Either way, it gives Owlcat a new system to try out, and I expect good things. Last thing I want to tell you about is the companions. Owlcat has always generated an original cast of followers to travel with in place of other players. And in my opinion, they're probably the best part of Owlcat's games. They feel varied and full of personality. I'm excited to see what they come up with. However, right here, right now, I can tell you with certainty that we will see a few specific companions. Now, Rogue Trader is like the one and only 40k property where humans and aliens can hang out and be friends, so the pen and paper system includes fully written classes to play as Orc Freebooters and Weird Boys, Kroot Mercenaries, Tau Fire Warriors, and Dark Eldar Cabalite Warriors, or Witches. Now, as a Rogue Trader, you have to be human. So I can say with near certainty that we're going to see every single one of these classes represented as a companion. If not at launch, then certainly as a DLC. I suspect we'll meet either a recruitable freebooter or weird boy, probably a weird boy, in the first adventure during the Orc invasion. That's if we're doing the Warpstorm trilogy. We're almost certainly going to meet a Kroot and a Tau working in conjunction with one another that can be recruited, and I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to meet a brother and sister Dark Eldar duo. Why do I think they'll be siblings? No reason. That just sounds right to me. But I can guarantee that the two of them will be extremely dreamy goths and will have very, very scary romance available for you if you like pain. We've seen in Wrath of the Righteous that Owlcat has been offering a ton of companions these days. Many of which are specific to which paths you follow down the game. Like if you follow the Lich path in Wrath of the Righteous, you basically get to replace your entire party with undead companions. We will probably see something like this return in Rogue Trader, not the, zombie companions thing, but like more companions being available only with certain choices. Perhaps if you're more puritanical or radical.
It's unknown right here and now exactly how close Rogue Trader is going to stick to the FFG Rogue Trader system. In an interview with Rock Paper Shotgun this week, Alexander Gusev, Owlcat's creative director, stated that they're not transferring all the mechanics from Fantasy Flight, but those who played the company's series of 40k tabletop RPGs will find some familiarity. It's also noted that the devs were playing a homebrewed version of Rogue Trader that included Dark Heresy mechanics. I think it's safe to say that we're going to see a game system that is a hybrid of all the best parts of the various Warhammer 40k RPG editions, plus all the required tweaks to make it work in a CRPG. We'll probably see the return of most of Rogue Trader's classes, so we'll go over them in a minute. But first, there's a particular gameplay tone that the 40k system embodies that I want to go over.
If you've played CRPGs based off of Pathfinder or D&D, you're probably used to health pools ballooning over time and growing gigantic, accompanied by your damage output growing equivalently. But that's just not how the 40k D100 system works. Your health pool and that of your enemies won't go up by very much. No. You just get better at not getting hit. You get better at dodging. You purchase force fields and increasingly thick armor that can soak up damage before it ever manages to wound you. You start working as a team to suppress enemy shooters so that they can't take more than a few pot shots at you. But if you ever do get hit, well, then you're in trouble, because healing is slow, and you can lose entire limbs that will need to be replaced with bionics. Offensively, your damage goes up much more than your health pools do, but this gets countered somewhat by the stronger armor values. You will get better at disrupting, stunning, and trapping your foes, or at countering their dodge actions and reducing their armor with more penetrative weapons. It's a very deadly system, and players are heavily incentivized to think cleverly in order to put themselves into a position where they get to strike first. The game design has this funny philosophy you don't see in too many places, where they balance things out not by nerfing stuff that's very strong, but more by making everything really strong if you know what to do with it. Gear does increase in quality over time, but it's not to the level of other games. Your character is the main thing that gets stronger, and you can still kick some serious ass with nothing but a las gun if you play your cards right, though naturally upgrading will of course be better. It's a system with a lot of flaws, but mostly kind of beloved flaws. This game design actually plays pretty nicely with Owlcat's school of design. Owlcat offers a really wide difficulty range, from basically a story mode all the way to the kind of nightmares where even the most min-max power gaming will only give you a small chance of victory. Now, I'm not huge on min-maxing when it comes to tabletop games, it's just not fun to me, but that rapidly shifts when I'm playing a CRPG. Rogue Trader is going to give you a ton of options to create really powerful builds that are deadly in 100 different ways. Be it a chainsword fencer who gets in close and eviscerates with parries and counterattacks, or an astropath who tears apart mines on a whim. But Owlcat is almost certainly going to give you very difficult challenges to counteract your strategies, if that's what you want. And from my experiences with the Owlcat community, that is what most people seem to want. So we're going to get some really cool new puzzles to solve. But again, lots of game options. If you don't want to play that way, you won't have to. I expect really great things from the combat and skill system, so I think we have a lot to look forward to. Now, that being said, what classes are we going to have to work with? Well, this is where things get interesting, and I'm not certain how the game will handle it. See, in the tabletop game, whomever is playing as the Rogue Trader is supposed to play as the Rogue Trader class. This is kind of a problem for replayability in a CRPG, because you probably want to try different builds and classes for your main character. However, the Rogue Trader was always the class that was designed to give you the widest option of playstyles you could access, so they might actually just end up leaving it as is. It's hard to say. Worth noting, however, Owlcat has never been a stranger to homebrewing classes in their Pathfinder games, and even borrowing elements and changes from 2nd edition. I think that Rogue Trader will probably end up doing something similar, forcing your actual followers to use Rogue Trader classes, probably with some homebrewing, which I will outline in a second, whereas your player character might instead follow Dark Heresy 2nd edition rules. Or if not, then I think Owlcat will probably homebrew several different Rogue Trader subclasses. Both 1st and 2nd edition of 40k Roleplaying use EXP purchasing to buy abilities and stat increases. However, the 1st edition gives each class a unique list of what they can and can't buy with each level, as well as how much it costs. 2nd edition is actually a classless system, in which you're free to buy anything you'd like with your experience. However, character creation is set up to give you a bunch of keywords based off of your homeworld, background, and career that provide different discounts for buying related abilities. I think this system not only feels very true to the generalist leanings of how the Rogue Trader class functioned in 1st edition, but I think it also delivers on much more replayability and customization for the player. That's just my speculation. I can't tell you for sure if that's the way they're going to go, but if I was designing this thing, that's what I would do. So what are the classes? Well, in addition to the alien classes mentioned earlier, these are what the game has to offer. First, Rogue Traders. Though I've mostly said my piece. They're generalists who are equally good at both combat and leadership of the crew. Arch-militants. These are kind of the combat-focused class of the system, though you get to choose your actual fighting style. They're sort of like the fighter class of Rogue Trader, where you get to excel with whatever weapon you want to. Astropaths. This is your psychic class, though they are a step above your standard psyker. They specialize in telepathy and are the only ones in the galaxy who can communicate over the impossibly vast distances of the Imperium. Explorators. These are tech priests off in search of lost technologies on forgotten worlds. Like all tech priests of the 40k setting, explorators are very eager to replace their weak human flesh with advanced cybernetics instead. Being that we've already spotted an explorator in the trailer, I can virtually confirm right here and now that Rogue Trader will have an extensive system of limb damage and bionic replacements. Missionaries. Missionaries can come in a few flavors. You can be more of a social party face type, more of a healing and support sort of character, or you could just be a wild-eyed, I'm going to purge everything clean with fire sort of missionary. Navigators. The Imperium is super strict on oppressing mutants, but the biggest exception is navigators. Navigators possess an impossible-to-replicate mutation within their lineages that let them see the Astronomicon, the Emperor's light in the warp. No one else can guide a ship through the warp, so the Imperium tolerates the fact that navigators are completely riddled with otherworldly mutations. Navigators get to purchase a ton of different mutations to aid them, both in and out of combat. Seneschal. These are kind of a non-combat class that specialize in helping the Rogue Trader run the business side of things. Here we see an Owlcat blog post talking about a specific Seneschal character, and we appear to see him in gameplay as a follower during the trailer. Voidmaster. Voidmasters excel at all the machinery and skills related to void ships. They come with a wide packet of tech skills and some combat power, but they mainly excel at performing tasks in ship combat, which we'll talk about later. Lastly, it's worth noting that we've actually got some art out already, and we can use it to speculate off of for companions and what that implies for in-game classes. This right here, this is a Space Wolf. If you're not familiar with 40k, Space Wolves are a chapter of Space Marines who are the most powerful thing humans can be through extensive biological engineering. The TTRPG considers Space Marines to be beyond the power scope of Rogue Trader, so they have their own different game called Deathwatch. I highly doubt that this guy is a companion for that reason alone. Instead, he's probably just going to be a major character. Or if he is, he's an endgame companion that you'll get in the last half of the game when your team is already super powerful.
This right here, that's a Sister of Battle.
Like a war nun, basically. They aren't in the Rogue Trader rulebooks. However, they are right on the money when it comes to power levels. Therefore, this one is probably either a missionary class, or more likely she's a homebrewed Owlcat Sister of Battle class, or perhaps one of the Sisters of Battle parted over from Dark Heresy. Up above we have a pair of psychics, one of whom is holding the Astropath signifier, so we know that's what she is. On the other hand, she's notably odd-looking. You know, gray skin, gray hair, red eyes, and nails bordering on being talons. It's to the point where I suspect the setting would call her a mutant. Being that navigators are the mutants of Rogue Trader, and they actually can be psychic, I suspect that this character may be pulling double duty as both a navigator and an astropath. How that will work in gameplay is anyone's guess. They'll probably be one of your starter companions, cause you're not leaving Port Wander without a navigator. This other guy here is a psyker who isn't an astropath, which is something that isn't in the Rogue Trader rules, so I suspect he's another homebrew class, or possibly one posted over from one of the other 40k RPGs. Also, he kinda looks like punished Matt Mercer, which is neat. Between the two of them is clearly a Rogue Trader. We see him in the trailer here, he represents you. I think this is just an art rendition and you won't be forced to play as him or anything. Probably there will just be a portrait option you can pick to look like him if you want that. Lastly, we have an Eldar Ranger. This is another one that is not a normal Rogue Trader class, but it is on par for power levels. We see her here in the trailer as a companion, so we know that that's a thing. We may be getting her instead of those Dark Eldar I mentioned earlier, or we might get her in addition to one or more of them, just to create some drama. Last thing we know for sure about the gameplay. Rogue Trader has ship combat and ship management mechanics. Owlcat has also been known to have this sort of thing in their games. The Kingdom management in Kingmaker, and the Crusade management in Wrath of the Righteous. So we will almost certainly see this implemented into the gameplay. Unfortunately, these management elements in both Rogue Trader and the Owlcat CRPGs are, well, they're not well liked. So I must say that the idea of combining the two sounds, if I'm going to be honest, it doesn't sound very good to me. It sounds like kind of a nightmare. But who knows? They might surprise me. And they might learn their lessons from the Pathfinder games. Time will tell. However, the good news is that Owlcat includes an option to just disable that entire element of gameplay if you don't like it, so don't worry, it's not going to be a deal breaker if you aren't up for the management systems.
So, that's everything. What do you guys think? Are my predictions plausible? And hey, let me know down in the comments. Are we excited for this thing? Are we not? And if you like this video, please drop a like. Either way, see you next week.
This planet is ours, witch.
No, this planet is theirs.
I'd like to offer my special thanks to my first patrons who've stepped up to help me fund these videos. Jake Hansen, that perfidious Reddit burb, and the first $15 patron, Radu Stere. I hope I've said that right. And if you'd like to appear on a monthly patron credit roll, then you'll find a link to my Patreon in the description.